Anytime you beg another man to set you free, you will never be free. Freedom is something that you have to do for yourself.
Okay, now a little over a year ago, August of last year, I made a video about how we can get our governments to work for us again in a way that actually works for the benefit of all people and not the small handful of corporate, financial, and shadowy interests that really pull the strings of our governments currently. And I mentioned something briefly in that video, this idea that we needed a Neo Magna Carta, to renew Magna Carta, that we need a movement, a mass movement of people to pretty much stand up for their rights and really to take back all these rights that over the course of many centuries have been chipped away at and eroded and taken away from us. And I'll put a clip to that here.
So yeah, I don't think it's going to be easy to get this idea, to enforce this idea, to actually get our government to accept our tax dollars into a covenant. It's going to be something we have to force upon them, very similar to the way that the Magna Carta was forced onto the monarch of England. We're going to have to stand up for ourselves and say, you're not doing this to us any longer. And that's really what it's going to take. I'm going to make a separate video about how we can actually organize doing that. I'm going to title that the Neo Magna Carta. This one is the New Covenant. But ultimately, we're going to force these people to give us our freedom back, or they're going to trap us in a technological control grid very similar to what you see in China, and it's going to be a miserable future for all of us. And I don't think any of us really want that. And really, I think it's going to come to this point where people aren't going to want to try to even stand up to their government until they probably try to issue these central bank digital currencies. And I think there's a lot of unified people really don't want that system. And when they try to force that system on us, that's when we have to say, no, actually, we're going to you're not putting the shackle on us. We're going to put the shackle on you. The government shouldn't be chaining us with digital ID and central bank digital currencies. We have to put the chains on our government.
Now, I was biding my time to make this video. I wanted to wait for the opportune moment to kind of present this idea to people. Now, I've come here when it's the middle of the night so that there aren't many people around. I can make this video in peace, but really this idea of a Neo Magna Carta, that we need to renew Magna Carta and have like a mass movement of people where we force our politicians to adopt policies that will benefit us again in the long run. Now, I was waiting for the opportune time to make this video, and when Keir Starmer announced a month ago that they'd be making digital ID mandatory for British citizens to work, and I knew I'd be coming here, I figured this is the perfect time. I'm in the home of Magna Carta. I'm a Canadian citizen, but we still operate under British common law system, and a lot of our legal framework is built off of the British common law system. And technically the Crown here is our head of state, although it's technically the Governor General, his representative in our country. I am technically also a subject of the British Crown as a Canadian citizen. So I feel like I have the right to say these things if I want to. And I feel like the opportunity to say these things, the window to say these things is closing, because they're trying to use these digital ID systems to take away everything from us, everything that the people gained, initially the barons, who granted themselves these rights by getting the king to seal the Magna Carta. That only lasted briefly. It was only like 4 months later when the king tried to annul that and pretty much undo it, but it wasn't initially even meant for the average person. It was only really meant for the barons. And it wasn't until the peasant revolts many years later that this was actually something that was brought on for regular people. But I mean, when the barons demanded these rights for themselves, they weren't demanding them for the average person. They were the free men, the landlords. And really, this digital ID system is an attempt to use technology to return people back to serfdom and to enforce these UN Sustainable Development Guidelines, which are really the road to hell is paved with those guidelines. And they're trying to drag us to hell with these digital ID systems that they can then use to enforce those UN Sustainable Development Guidelines, which will take away all of our freedom from us. And it'll be very hard to get those freedoms back if we ever submit to this. So we absolutely cannot yield to that, but we also can't trust our elected officials to actually represent us and to actually do what's right in our interests. I think it's very clear now to the world that people like Jeffrey Epstein have been blackmailing our political leaders, and they're not beholden to the people anymore. They're completely beholden to these special interests, these people that are blackmailing them, bribing them. They don't work for us. They don't represent us. Keir Starmer didn't say that he was going to impose these things when he was running for his campaign. He sprung this on you after he won the election. He didn't give him a mandate to do these things to you. And the whole parliamentary system, it grew out of Magna Carta. It was supposed to be a system that represents the interests of the average person. And if you look around at your parliament, that they do not represent the average person anymore. They represent big financial corporate interests that do not have the same interests as the average person. And if you want to take these powers back, it's going to require not everybody, but a mass movement of people to demand very specific things. And in the same way that they're trying to use these technologies to take away your freedoms, we have to use technology to force the government to work for us again. And this is something that's happening worldwide. It's not just Britain. It's happening also in Canada, though. The government in Canada, they got elected. And now they're trying to impose all these new laws, these new restrictions so that they can take people's voices off of the internet, take away your ability to even use the internet. Very draconian legislation that's just meant to strip people of their voice. And really, if people want to stop this, it's going to require a mass movement of people not just getting angry, because I think there's a lot of danger, and we have to avoid being seditious in our language and in our actions, because if you act seditiously, they'll try to paint you as a threat or a terrorist. But if we paint this as a way that we're going to use technology to make corruption in our government impossible, they can't frame you that way. They can't try to paint you as a bad person and say that you're a threat to everyone else, or that you're trying to overthrow the government. I don't think this is not a message about overthrowing the government. It's about forcing the government to work for the interests of the people the way the parliamentary system was created to actually work. And if you look around, we know that that's not how the world works anymore. I mean, all of the things that the Magna Carta was set out to resolve, they exist again in maybe a more covert form. But all of these things have modernized and have made their way back into the modern world. And if we want to live as free people on a free planet, because this is again a global agenda that's happening and playing out all over the planet in all different countries, if we want to avoid that, it's going to require all of us to demand certain technological changes be imposed on our government so that they cannot act in a corrupt way, so that they cannot subvert the will of the people. And really, there's a lot of things that I'm going to talk about. I'm going to actually write a book about this. I hope to have that out maybe next year. When I came to the UK, I thought that I would have to scan and fingerprint. I thought I would have to scan my fingerprints and my biometrics when I came into the country. That was supposed to go into effect on October 12th. And they announced that very loudly, but then they canceled it very quietly. And I think that that's part of what's happening here, is that they had to announce that quietly because they don't want people to get the idea that mass resistance is effective. That if people put up enough of a fuss and say, you're not going to do this to us, that their power is very limited. They can only impose these things on us when we yield. So if we don't yield to them, this isn't going to work for them. Now, it's like I said, this isn't going to be an easy thing. Just like when the king sealed the Magna Carta initially and tried to have it repealed a few months later, or had it annulled by the Pope a few months later, they're going to try to fight this. If we try to take our power back, they're going to fight it in every way possible. It's going to be an uphill battle. But it's really, we have no choice at this point. We have to reassert ourselves and really just make it very clear that we are not going to yield to these demands. When Keir Starmer got on TV and said that, when he got in front of the cameras and said that he's going to make digital ID mandatory, he's threatening your livelihood. I mean, I lost 3 of my jobs for not taking the COVID vaccines. I was a paramedic in Canada. I was fired from 3 of my jobs a month before my son was born. And I can't tell you the stress that I went through having to deal with the loss of my income right before the birth of my son. I mean, taking away someone's livelihood is akin to threatening their life. He got on TV and he's threatening you, he's threatening your livelihood, he's threatening your liberties. So that cannot stand. A threat like that, you cannot have a parliamentary system that's supposed to represent the people, have an election run where nothing like this gets mentioned, and then they win an election and spring this on you. These people are full of shit. And it's a clear sign of how corrupt the system has become that they can win an election and then threaten the very people that they say they represent like that. We all know that nobody wants the system. The only people who want that are the people who are in positions of power and the people who are bribing, blackmailing, and controlling the people in power so that they can maintain the wealth that they earn through dishonest means, really through corruption. So, I mean, if people want to prevent these digital ID systems from taking away all of their freedoms in perpetuity, they're going to have to assert themselves. And the way to do that is with a list of reasonable demands where we impose real change on our government so that it cannot act in this corrupt manner anymore. And the way to do that is with technology like blockchain, using covenants to collect our taxes so that they it's not possible for them to mismanage or steal our tax money. That's the way it's going to have to go. Now, I think it's universally understood that people do not want these digital ID systems, but the interests of certain people who are in power are completely contrary to the interests of the average person. The average person wants freedom and liberty, whereas the people in power, they want to be able to control and dictate to you how you live your life, and they really want to be able to impose these UN Sustainable Development Guidelines on us. I think that's really the ultimate goal of these digital ID systems, these centralized digital ID systems, is to create a system where they can control every aspect of your life and every choice in your life gets stripped away from you so that they can turn you into a robot where you won't be able to act through your own free will anymore. You'll only be able to act and operate through the permissions that they grant you. And that's absolutely the return to serfdom. But it's a technological return to serfdom. And to escape from that level of technological serfdom will be next to impossible if we allow that to happen, which is why we cannot allow that to happen. Now, it's like I said, I lost 3 of my jobs to the COVID vaccine mandates in Canada. And it's like I said, losing your livelihood is akin to having your life threatened. To say that you won't be able to feed your family is threatening your family. It's threatening you, it's threatening your children. So for him to just boldly go on TV and threaten you, all of the UK citizens like that, is absolute bullshit. And to do that with the pretense that he has a mandate to do this to you because you elected him, when none of that was mentioned during his election campaign, is completely contradictory to the idea that he represents the people. These people don't represent our interests anymore. None of these governments operate in the interests of their own people anymore. They're all corrupt. They're all working for a criminal cabal of bankers who really, they've enslaved us through debt. I was fortunate to meet Canada's former Defence Minister, Paul Hellyer. He was the Defence Minister of Canada between 1964 and 67. He ran the Canadian Bank Reformers, and he was one of the very few people within my country who was able to say these things very, very boldly, very clearly, that these governments are enslaving you to debt that's created from nothing. And he was a personal hero of mine for being able to say those things and having a platform that he could say that and to be taken seriously, because he was our defense minister. He was one of the highest ranking members of our government for a period of time. I mean, really, ultimately, the people have to decide if they're going to yield to this. And I don't think any of us really do. I think it's all of us recognize that we can't allow this to happen. Anyone who's really thought about it, thought through what they're trying to do to us, it's going to be on us, those of us who recognize where this is heading. I don't think we need everybody in society to take a stand, but there are certain things that I think we need to learn from. And the idea of getting your government to work for you, there's certain examples in history. I call my channel Crypto Spartacus because I was inspired by the Spartacus figure in the slave uprising in ancient Rome. And I think really we've gone back through the last few hundred years into a new form of slavery where they use debt to enslave us instead. And I think part of what we need to demand in a new Magna Carta is that this is never going to happen again. That they're not going to be able to issue debt from nothing and force the people to work it off like slaves. And there's going to be a lot more that I'm going to add to this video when I get back to Canada.
Okay, now in this video I wanted to present what I think is an ideal solution to one of the biggest problems, the biggest challenges facing all of humanity at this point. And that's the simple reality that our governments, by and large, no longer represent the will of the people anymore. That corruption in the political arena has become so extreme that our political systems are almost irredeemably corrupt. And I think this has been emphasized really recently by the proposed implementation of digital ID systems, which I think represent the end game of what Aldous Huxley warned about almost 100 years ago when he warned about this idea of an ultimate revolution.
Well, now, in regard to this problem of the ultimate revolution, this has been very well summed up by the moderator. In the past, we can say that all revolutions have essentially aimed at changing the environment in order to change the individual. I mean, there's been the political revolution, the economic revolution, in the time of the Reformation, the religious revolution. All these aimed, as I say, not directly at the human being, but at his surroundings, so that by modifying the surroundings you did achieve, at one remove, an effect upon the human being. Today, we are faced, I think, with the approach of what may be called the ultimate revolution, the final revolution, where, well, it seems to me that the nature of the ultimate revolution with which we are now faced is precisely this, that we are in process of developing a whole series of techniques which will enable the controlling oligarchy, who have always existed and presumably always will exist, to get people actually to love their servitude. This is seems to me the ultimate in malevolent revolution, shall we say. And this is a problem which has interested me for many years, and about which I wrote 30 years ago a fable, The Brave New World, which is essentially the account of a society making use of all the devices at that time available, and some of the devices which I imagined to be possible, making use of them in order to, first of all, to standardize the population, to iron out inconvenient human differences, to create, so to say, mass-produced models of human beings arranged in some kind of a scientific caste system.
And I think once these digital ID systems, if they're able to be imposed on the general public, will represent the final piece of that plan, where once these things are in place, we'll never be able to escape from them. I'm going to use this clip of this veteran, this World War II veteran. This went viral a few weeks ago, stating that he no longer thinks that their sacrifice was worth it. I'll put that here.
What does Remembrance Sunday mean for you? What is your message?
My message is, I can see in my mind's eye those rows and rows of white stones of all the hundreds of my friends and everybody else that gave their lives for what? The country of today. No, I'm sorry. The sacrifice wasn't worth the result that it is now.
Oh, well, I'm sorry.
What do you mean by that, though, at this point?
What we fought for, and what we fought for was our freedom. We find that even now it's darn sight worse than what it was when I fought for it.
Oh, Alec, I'm sorry you feel like that.
Now, to me, this video is absolutely heartbreaking, because you have to consider that we, in the past, we fought for things that we thought we were fighting for our freedom. Over the course of thousands of years, really throughout all of human history, we've had this ongoing battle between people who want to wield power and authority over everyone else, and people who just want to live their lives freely and as prosperously as possible, to give themselves and their families the best possible lives they can. And I think we're facing this reality now, where we're facing this ultimate revolution that's taking shape through technology. And in order to address and combat that reality, we have to use technology to preserve our freedom. And I think we owe it to future generations, we owe it to our children, we owe it to ourselves, and we owe it to past generations to actually step up and do something about it. Because if we just allow ourselves to be dragged to hell by these people, to be dragged into a horrible future that we don't want for ourselves or our children, we'll regret it forever. So it's really incumbent upon us to recognize that we aren't going to remedy these problems by repeating the same patterns of behavior that led us to this point to begin with. I don't think there's a way that we can vote the right people in and just hope that they do the right thing, because we've seen time and time again that by doing that, it hasn't worked out to our advantage. Again, that's the pattern of behavior that's got us to where we are now. Now, I'm sure many people, if you like that idea, you might wonder, well, how can we make this happen? And I think the idea laid forth in the movie V for Vendetta is actually a really powerful idea. I think that we need to spread this idea as far as we can, and plant the seeds of this idea in as many minds as possible over the course of the next few years. But I think ultimately we need to choose a day.
Remind the world that fairness, justice, and freedom are more than words. They are perspectives. So if you've seen nothing, if the crimes of this government remain unknown to you, then I would suggest that you allow the 5th of November to pass unmarked. But if you see what I see, if you feel as I feel, and if you would seek as I seek, then I ask you to stand beside me 1 year from tonight, outside the gates of Parliament, and together we shall give them a 5th of November that shall never, ever be forgotten.
And demand that the people who have been elected to our Parliament acknowledge that the will of the people is to have these new Neo Magna Carta-like documents signed and agreed to. And in this document, we need to have certain steps that will be taken after that to ensure that it's actually adhered to. So immediate changes need to be made, both in terms of accounting and in terms of reversing decisions that are being made right now by our parliamentary system, by the parliamentary systems, which egregiously violate the will of the people. For someone like Keir Starmer to get on TV and say that digital ID is going to be made mandatory is a threat to the people that he claims to represent. We should not have parliamentarians threatening us when they claim to represent us. That's absolutely the most direct evidence available that these people don't actually represent us, that they're not truly public servants. And if we really want to escape the fate that they have planned for us, we're going to have to accept the responsibility that our lives are our own. That really, if we don't want our children to live this way, if we don't want to live this way, and if we don't want to shame past generations by accepting this, the responsibility is on each of us to make sure that this doesn't happen. We have to stop giving responsibilities to parliamentarians and to politicians who clearly only want to tell us the lies that we want to hear so that they can wield the ring of power. And I think truly that technology is going to be the way that we disempower corruption. This isn't a call to overthrow our government. This isn't a call for a violent revolution. It's a call for all of us to come together around our common interests, and a call to really unify around this idea that our future doesn't have to be this dystopian nightmare. That our lives belong to us, and that these people who have used corruption of a system that was meant to serve us to work against us, are not going to succeed because we are not going to allow it. So really, I truly think that we need to pick a day, much like in the movie V for Vendetta. We have to pick a day, and then we all have to unite on that day and make it known very clearly to the people who we've elected to represent us that this is our will, that we want to have our rights enshrined into a new Neo Magna Carta, a new digital Bill of Rights, whatever we want to call it. We have to assert ourselves and make it very clear that if they truly claim to represent us, that they have to follow our will in signing these new documents. And I don't think it's going to end there. I think much like how the original much like how the Magna Carta was something that people had to fight for over the course of decades and hundreds of years because the kings and the establishment didn't want to adhere to these new rules and restrictions, we're going to have to continue to fight for it after that. But really, it doesn't need to be, and it shouldn't be, something that's done through violence. These people, throughout the course of human history, they used violence and force to maintain control over people. But we're not living in the 1800s anymore, when our original founding documents in many places were signed. Technology has really changed the entire landscape of our lives. And we need to use technology to make sure that these documents that we want, these new rules for how the government can conduct itself, have checks and balances in place using technology to actually take away the government's power to violate our rights. And in the exact same way that they're trying to use technology to violate our rights, we can use technology to make sure that that doesn't happen, and to put restrictions on what our parliamentary systems are capable of doing to us. And really, this isn't a call to overthrow the government, it's a call to eliminate government corruption, so that the government who pretends that they are government servants currently can't treat us like they're slaves. Because truly, they've been using us as slaves while saying that they serve us. And really, we have to call them out on this, and we can't rally behind a person or a group of people or a political party with the hopes that they're going to do what's best for us. That's, again, repeating the pattern of behavior that's got us to this point. If we really want to change things, if we really want to preserve our freedom for future generations and to take back the freedom that we've lost over the course of many decades, it's going to be on us to do it for ourselves. We're not just going to have to make demands, but we're going to have to use technology to ensure that those demands are met and preserved going forwards. So I'm going to make a series of follow-up videos to this where I expand on this idea and expand on what will need to be done to make sure that the cat and mouse game that has taken place over the course of all of human history between those who want to rule and those who want to be free, that game of cat and mouse comes to an end so that we can preserve freedom for not just our own countrymen and our own people, but people all over the world. Because really, if you see what's going on in the world with these changes that are happening, these digital ID systems that government want to enforce on us, it's a global agenda that's playing out across the entire planet. And I think all of us will need to unite and put our differences aside if we really want to change that. So I think this is an idea that once we've planted it in the minds of people, it'll be very hard to shake. It'll be very hard to get people to give up this idea once they've accepted that we can actually create a better future for ourselves than the one that's currently planned for us.